Some folks feel like some stories are worth more than others.
I heard about the Sakia Gunn murder just quite by accident watching the local news. And they were reporting on a 15-year-old black girl that was killed in downtown Newark. And, you know, of course, curiously, I looked up, but the image that I saw was not a 15-year-old black girl, it was a 15-year-old black boy. And I immediately thought, there's some gender bias, some anti-gay violence, or something going on here that they're not reporting on. Sakia Gunn and a few of her friends were returning from the pier, and if you've ever been to the pier in New York City during the summertime, you know there are throngs upon throngs of lesbian gay youth who hang out at the piers because it's free. There's nowhere else for them to go. And there's a lot of them there. It's kind of like the Zocalo of the lesbian and gay, bisexual, transgender community for people of color. You know, it's just where they go.
For a few decades, the West Village, and particularly the Christopher Street area, has been a haven or a place people knew to go to sort of be absorbed into a community.
They were coming home from there at around 3 o'clock in the morning, returning to Newark, and they were approached by a carload of men who approached them sexually, and they rebuffed their sexual advances. Words were exchanged, a fight ensued, and one of the men stabbed Sakia in the altercation, and she bled out on the street corner in downtown Newark waiting for a bus. I was that kid. You know, I grew up in the inner city. I was 15 years old when I came out, and my gender was somewhat ambiguous at that point. Like, I used to always get called a lesbian, you know. It was hard for a black gay kid growing up in the inner city. So I was immediately drawn to this story. So when I was approached about producing it, I was like, absolutely yes.
I used to be a pier kid, and I used to go down there, you know, whenever I needed to, or just kind of let off steam. And there was a large group of people at any given time across the other side of the highway, hanging out, and it's a lot more scattered now. And so what we've noticed with our work at Fierce, as well as some of our ties to the Audre Lorde Project based in Brooklyn, is an increase in homophobic and transphobic violence.
Of course, you heard about Amadou Diallo, who was murdered here in New York. Big media event. You heard about Matthew Shepard, who was murdered. Again, a big media event. But when it comes to someone who is black and gay, they fall in this crevasse that, you know, the media doesn't care about.
Unfortunately, the experiences of minority groups in general are more invisible than dominant groups, right? And we know that as queer people, we know that as people of color, we know that as people with disabilities, we know that as older people, like, we know that as young people.
It has a lot to do with who people want to see, and it's not black and brown people as victims of violence. It's more routine to see us as perpetrators of violence. It's more familiar to folks that are watching mainstream media usually. And when it comes to who people are going to feel more sorry for, it's going to be Matthew Shepard versus Amanda Milan or Sakia Gunn.
We're trying to bring attention to the invisibility of the LGBT people of color community, because there should have been a national outcry when Sakia was killed, as well as any other, racial bias incident, gender bias, age bias. In other words, the people in those communities, we have to learn how to cry out when things like that happen. Rather than sitting around waiting for white people to tell black people's stories or straight people to tell gay people's stories, our community has to step up and say, this was our 15-year-old daughter, she was our daughter, And we have to tell her story. It's not anybody else's responsibility to do it except for ours. The lives of lesbian and gay youth are not disposable.